My name is Brian Sloan. I'm president of the Nebraska Chamber of Commerce, and I want to welcome you to today's program, which is part of our deep dive series, where we're taking a look at various critical issues related to the economic recovery following the COVID crisis. Today's session focuses on upcoming implementation of the USMCA Trade Agreement, and perhaps no state has a greater interest per capita in this trade agreement than Nebraska. So I want to thank you for being part of this afternoon. I also want to thank Farmers Mutual, which is our sponsor for this event, and also want to thank Emeritus, which is providing technology assistance for us this afternoon, and I'm much appreciated. For Nebraska, our central location in our key industries of agriculture, manufacturing, transportation, and logistics make the North American trade a core element to our state's economic success. And for today, we are joined by a number of distinguished speakers, and we are very happy to have this group assembled today. It includes Governor Pete Ricketts, and from Canada, Consul General Ariela de Loya, from Mexico, Deputy Consul Ricardo Sanchez, and from the U.S. Department of Commerce, Kyle Wells, who's the Canada Desk Officer. But first, before we begin, a few administrative items. First, as members of the program today, you will be muted during the presentation, but please make sure to take the opportunity to ask questions of our panelists. You can do that through the Q&A function, which I believe is at the bottom right hand of your screen. At any point today, you can enter your questions, and at the end of the session, we will pick up those questions and respond. So please participate in that. So, let me introduce at this point our governor, who's been a strong advocate of free and fair trade. Governor Ricketts has hosted a number of conferences around the world, foreign trade missions that have been very successful in expanding the global reach of Nebraska's economy. So on behalf of the Nebraska business community, let me both thank Governor Ricketts and also introduce him to you and turn the program over to the governor. Governor.
Great. Hey, well, thank you very much, Brian. I appreciate it. And I want to thank Consul General de Loya, as well as Deputy Consul Sanchez. And Deputy Consul Sanchez, please make sure that you express our condolences to Consul Sanchez Salazar on the loss of her husband. We're all very terribly sorry about that, and I know she's going through a tough time right now. And then also, Kyle, thank you very much for joining us as well. We appreciate your participation in this. And Brian, as you were saying, you know, we are looking at recovering from the pandemic here in the state of Nebraska. And right now, I'm pleased to say that we have the lowest amount of hospitalizations that we have in the state due to coronavirus since we kept track of it. We actually only started getting complete data on April 25th. At that time, we had 149 hospitalizations, and now we're down to about 125 hospitalizations. And in addition to having the lowest hospitalizations we have the lowest unemployment rate in the country as well at 5.2%. So we can start thinking about moving on from just the coronavirus and just thinking about the coronavirus and looking at what we're going to do to continue to grow our great state. And that's where, again, USMCA becomes such an important part of that. Nebraska is an agricultural state. That's our number one industry. And we need to look to grow our trade relationships to be able to grow our state and to grow our number one industry. And that's why I'm so grateful that Deputy Consul Sanchez joined us, as well as Consul General de Loya, to talk about USMCA. It really is important that we continue to look to expand. And of course, these are two countries that have been our closest allies, through the pandemic. The consulate for Mexico has been helpful in our communications with the Hispanic community here in our state. So we appreciate what Consul Sanchez Salazar has been helping with regard to that. And of course, Canada shares the same anniversary we do as our state. We turned 150 years old, and it was the same year, I believe, Consul General de Loya, as Canada became 150 years old. So we've got that in common. And this is also the 50th anniversary of founding your consulate in Minneapolis, is it not? So congratulations on that.
Yes, it is.
All right. So obviously these are two great partners that we've got here in the state of Nebraska. And USMCA is a great way to take our relationship to the next level. If you take a step back, going to July 2017, I convened a Council for International Relations in Nebraska to bring together leaders from agriculture, business, and education to talk about what we could do to expand our international trade relationships and how we could work together, with regard to all the efforts that were going on in the state of Nebraska to really present a unified effort to be able to expand our trade relationships. One of the first things that the Council did was to outline the principles for the modernization of Nafta. And in that, we advocated for three primary principles to update that trade agreement. First of all, maintain market access. We wanted to make sure that we were growing market access for our North American partners in areas, especially for agriculture and manufacturing, and that any change should really protect that access for our investors and companies doing business in Canada and Mexico and vice versa. The second was to reduce tariff and non-tariff trade barriers. Certainly NAFTA did a lot to reduce barriers for trade, and we saw that with the increased trade that happened between the three countries. There were still opportunities to reduce or eliminate tariffs on a variety of different items, as well as non-tariff trade barriers, and look at regulatory issues as well. Obviously, we're keen on things in this agreement like dairy and poultry and eggs and ethanol, and those were all the types of products we wanted to see prioritized in reducing barriers. And then the third priority was around technological advances. So NAFTA was originally signed back in 1993 when the internet was really not a thing. And so that's just one example of the many technological changes that occurred, but there's certainly many others such as biotechnology and crop science. And that was important that we modernize NAFTA to reflect this changing technology that we've seen around the world. And so I'm really grateful that the Trump administration took those three principles and that our friends in Canada and Mexico incorporated them into the USMCA to be able to get an agreement that is going to help us take this wonderful trade relationship we have between the three countries and take it to the next level, move it forward. It's going to maintain market access. So all food agricultural products had zero tariffs under NAFTA, and it remains at zero tariffs under USMCA. USMCA exceeds NAFTA standards to facilitate better trade in manufactured goods, among other provisions. The agreement has a market access chapter that maintains duty-free treatment of originating goods, maintains the prohibition on export duties, taxes, and other charges, and the waiver of specific custom processing fees, and prohibits parties from applying requirements to use local distributors for importation. So that was great there. With regard to dairy, poultry, and eggs that I mentioned, Canada has agreed to provide new tariff rate quotas exclusively for the United States, and so we absolutely appreciate that. USMCA also includes financial services and helps level the playing field for U.S. financial service suppliers. The agreement has a chapter on financial services that includes, the national treatment to ensure that U.S. financial service suppliers receive the same treatment as local suppliers, most favored nation treatment, market access, which prohibits the imposition of certain qualitative and numerical restrictions that would limit the business of U.S. financial suppliers. So that was important for us as well. And of course, USMCA eliminates the local presence requirement for cross-border service providers, and that's primarily going to benefit small businesses by reducing the burden that they would have by having that foreign office when many small businesses can't do that to be able to do business. So we think that was a great part of this agreement. And again, we just mentioned some of the things about the internet. Going back to 1993, really wasn't a thing. It was still DARPANet at the time. So that's great. USMCA's digital trade chapter prohibits custom duties on digital products that are distributed electronically, things like videos, ebooks, music, software, games, things like that. Protects cross-border data flows and limits data localization requirements, limits parties' ability to require disclosure of proprietary source code and algorithms. So again, it really recognizes the importance of digital trade. And of course, that was something that really wasn't really even being that conceived of, back when NAFTA was first drafted. USMCA's intellectual property chapter provides strong and effective protection and enforcement for IP rights, which is critical. That will allow us to drive innovation, it helps create economic growth, supports jobs, all these high standard protections for our trade secrets are going to be important to be able to make sure that our companies are protected. And USMCA addresses agricultural biotechnology, and of course this is important to Nebraska because we're a leader and innovator when it comes to agricultural technology, and that is an important that we continue to have that protection, and that there aren't barriers with regard to that. The new technologies such as gene editing, whereas the Trans-Pacific Partnership, for example, only covered traditional rDNA technology. The United States, Mexico, and Canada have agreed to provisions to enhance information exchange and cooperation on agricultural biotechnology trade matters, which is really, really important for us. So, this is, really all good news for our trading relationship between Nebraska and Canada and Mexico. And, of course, that's one of the things I've tried to foster and promote as governor. I had the pleasure of leading a trade mission to Canada in 2017 and 2 trade missions to Mexico, one in 2018 and one in 2019. Canada is our second leading supplier of imports to the state of Nebraska. According to trade statistics, Nebraska imported over $900 million from Canada in 2019, which represents over 20% of the state's total imports. Mexico is our number 3 largest supplier of imports. Nebraska's imports from Mexico grew 17.7% from 2018 to 2019. So again, we see a great relationship there. And of course, Mexico and Canada are top destinations for exports as well. The two countries combined account for about 45% of our exports. And so that's a wonderful relationship we want to continue to grow. And as I mentioned, agriculture, again, is Nebraska's largest industry, and Mexico and Canada are, of course, leading destinations for our world-class agricultural products. Mexico is the largest market for our corn and dairy. Canada is the second largest market for ethanol and dairy. We want to continue to be able to grow that. And, of course, then you see the investment back here in our state. Mexican companies employ about 5,500 Nebraskans here in our state. Mexican companies are doing business such as Lala Brands, which is the flagship of Mexico City-based dairy company Grupo Lala. The brand covers a wide range of products. We had a chance to visit with them when I was in Mexico City before, and we're treated to those products, so that was awesome. Lala bought a dairy plant in Omaha in 2008 from Wells, and it has a 90,000-foot cultured dairy facility, yogurt smoothies, blended yogurts, crema mexicana, which is Mexican-style sour cream. All this is being produced right here in Nebraska. And we want to continue to see the opportunities for that to continue to grow here. And then, of course, Canadian companies also employ people in Nebraska, about 1,900 Nebraskans. And we have Ag Growth International, AGI, is based in Winnipeg. A company plans, engineers, manufactures solutions across 5 platforms: seed, fertilizer, grain, feed, and food. AGI acquired Global Industries in 2017. And again, this just really goes to the strengths that we have here in agriculture, and seeing that investment here in our state from our great trading partners in Mexico and Canada around our state's leading industry. So again, you're not going to find somebody who's more in favor of making sure we expand trade opportunities for the state of Nebraska than me. We want to continue to develop the great relationships we have with Canada and Mexico to be able to grow those opportunities for people in both countries, and are very excited to support USMCA and look forward to the new agreement taking effect on July 1st. It really marks a significant advance in our mutual agricultural, environmental, labor, and intellectual property commitments. It's a tremendous accomplishment that will enrich all of our countries and help us continue to expand trade. And again, on behalf of all Nebraskans, I want to thank Canada and Mexico for their participation in USMCA and getting this across the finish line in all 3 countries. Obviously, that's going to be it was not an easy path in each of the countries. It was a lot of work in all 3, and it took the cooperation of all 3 countries and work by leaders in all 3 countries to be able to get the agreement approved. And we're very, very grateful, and want to continue to grow this relationship and wish Canada and Mexico continued peace and prosperity. We're all excited about the future partnership, and especially getting back to the point where when the virus dies down, we can get back to a more normal life where we continue to have those trade, trade missions and so forth, and can continue to see people travel to our great state and have more personal interaction rather than just doing these phone calls. But again, I just want to say thank you to our partners in Mexico and Canada. We're very grateful for your business, and we want to see this continue to expand. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Consul General DeLuya.
Thank you very much, Governor. Thank you, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be with all of you this afternoon. Only second best, I guess, to being in person, but such is the reality that we're all having to adapt to right now. Brian, I want to thank you and the staff at the Chamber of Commerce for hosting this event. This is really a timely occasion, as next Wednesday, July 1st, is, for us at least, a double holiday. It represents the entry into force of the new USMCA, or as we call it in Canada, USMCA, and our Mexican colleagues call it TMEC. And of course, it's also Canada Day, to which the Governor alluded, the date that marks Confederation in Canada back in 1867. I'm always honored to share a stage, virtual or otherwise, with Governor Ricketts, who, from the time he first took office, emphasized the benefits of international trade to Nebraska and the importance of Nebraska's location at the center of North America. He alluded to the fact that 2017 was the year of our shared sesquicentennial, and in fact, that was a year in which, as he pointed out, he led a trade mission to Canada. I believe it was his first. And at that time, he said something very prescient. He said, if you were running a business, you would start with your best customers. We're coming up to say thank you to Canadians for their business. Governor, thank you for your business as well. And I can't help but note that you've been to Mexico on 2 trade visits, one to Canada. I believe you're now due for another visit to Canada at some point, hopefully as soon as things return to normal.
Your math is correct. I do owe you a trip. Perfect.
We'll work with you anytime, sir, to make that happen and make that something that benefits both Nebraskans and Canadians. I'm really proud to say that Canada and Mexico remain Nebraska's best customers and largest international trading partners. In that spirit, I want to thank my colleague, Mexican Deputy Consul Ricardo Sanchez, and as well Kyle Wells from the U.S. Commercial Service for joining us for this discussion today. So what's the new USMCA? Governor Ricketts shed some light on that. Let me put it this way. To understand the USMCA, we need to go back 25 years in the past to the implementation of Nafta in 1994. When we created Nafta, we established in the process a free trade zone that was the biggest economic region in the world. Today, that zone represents $22 trillion worth of trade, encompassing almost 500 million consumers. In 2016, NAFTA partners represented 28% of the world's GDP, with about 7% of the world's population. Talk about punching above our weight. NAFTA created a North America where Canadian, American, and Mexican companies do more than make and sell finished goods to each other. Now, increasingly, our companies make things together and sell them to the world as part of multiple, highly integrated supply chains that have only grown stronger since we implemented NAFTA in the 90s. So what does USMCA change? Well, first of all, the good news is that this agreement preserves all of the gains and successes of NAFTA, but it adds to those. It ensures, of course, continued duty-free access for the vast majority of the goods we all produce. It maintains NAFTA outcomes on trade and services and for labor mobility, while also bringing it into the modern era, again, something the governor pointed out. It reduces red tape at the border. It improves dispute settlement and intellectual property rights. It includes new chapters that, of course, we never thought about back in the 90s that address 21st century issues like digital trade. And finally, the USMCA includes new chapters on labor and the environment that are subject to dispute settlement and enforceable. These updates will help create incentives for higher wages and better conditions for workers in all 3 countries. Lance Frist, the CEO of Union Pacific Railway, said last week that the USMCA is a home run. He continued, we are a trading bloc that is going to be much more competitive globally as a result. Hold on a second, I'm just going to turn off these stupid phones that keep beeping for no reason. All right. He's right. And the very fact that our three governments took action to improve trade amongst ourselves has incentivized increased trade and investment into North America even before the USMCA came into force or comes into force next Wednesday. It's already helping us to be more competitive as a continent, as a trading bloc, in the face of fierce competition from our partners and friends in Europe through the European Union and in Asia, and you can think about ASEAN notably there. So let's focus in on some specific aspects of the USMCA that will benefit business in all of our countries. First, let's look at manufacturing. Even short-term uncertainty can weigh heavily on business and decision makers. New plants don't open, aging equipment isn't replaced, no new staff are hired. And so for a while there, while we were waiting for the ratification process to be concluded in each of our countries, we were, of course, all pressing in our respective orbits to try and get the agreement over the finish line in our parliament, in the U.S. Congress, and to their credit, first in the Mexican Congress. And to be fair as well, Governor Ricketts was an important player in exerting his political capital with colleagues in Washington to push the process along and with his congressional delegation. The agreement will continue to provide predictability and stability for businesses and workers, allowing us all to focus on our growth. The USMCA introduces new obligations and trade facilitation concepts that will help traders with their bottom lines, such as consistency and predictability in the tariff classification and customs valuation of their goods. A single window system that enables traders to submit import documentary requirements electronically through a portal. And finally, provisions that allow for circumstances in which traders may correct errors without penalty. A side note on small and medium-sized businesses. Mexico and Canada are the top two export destinations for goods produced by small and medium-sized enterprises, or SMEs. The USMCA recognizes the fundamental role these organizations play as engines of North American economic growth. And for the first time in a U.S. trade agreement, the USMCA includes a dedicated chapter on SMEs. Support for SMEs goes well beyond just the SME chapter. It includes, again, I alluded to red tape being cut at the border and the increase in de minimis levels for the value of goods that can be bought by travelers as they cross our respective borders. Promoting small business participation in government procurement, and including a chapter on good regulatory practices for the first time in a free trade agreement between our three countries. Next, again, the governor touched on agriculture. Let me go down that path as well. Preserving free trade in North America is not just a win for manufacturers, it's also a win for farmers, ranchers, and agribusinesses in each of our three countries. The agreement preserves existing agricultural commitments between Canada, the U.S., and Mexico, and expands U.S. market access in Canada for agricultural products, including dairy, poultry, and egg products. The agreement also allows for tariff elimination for whey powder, and margarine, the elimination of current mill classes 6 and 7, and allows U.S.-grown wheat of varieties registered in Canada to receive an official Canadian grain grade. This has been an ongoing area of concern for farmers in the United States. To put our trade relationship into context, bilateral agricultural trade between Nebraska and Canada totaled $556 million in 2019. Nebraska exported $308 million worth of products to Canada and imported $248 from us. There's room to grow even more exports into Canada, and we think that this agreement will help achieve that goal. Finally, I want to say something about integrated supply chains. The agreement preserves open access for supply chains. Even in the times of this pandemic, and thanks to key transport companies like Omaha's Werner Enterprises, goods continue to cross our borders every day. And I want to take the opportunity that this seminar affords us to thank Werner and all of their employees for being on the front lines and ensuring that we all have goods and products we need to survive and thrive, because their drivers are continuing their vital work, bringing vital cargo across our border and no doubt perhaps across the U.S.-Mexico border as well. Canada has worked very closely with U.S. officials to ensure that trucking firms are able to cross the border without restrictions of quarantine or other administrative delays. Perhaps the area of most change is with respect to country of origin for products. USMCA origin procedures have been modernized to better support today's trade environment and limit the administration costs to traders, including simplifying certification of the origin through the use of the invoice electronic transmission, including electronic signature. Overall, I think we should all be pleased with the new agreement. It preserves the almost 100% tariff-free environment between our three nations. It enhances trilateral trade by making things easier for existing importers and exporters and by making trade more accessible for new entrants. USMCA also enshrines forward-thinking provisions in a number of areas, making the USMCA a truly 21st century agreement that sets a high standard for future free trade agreements that we will negotiate with our other trading partners. As Governor Ricketts pointed out, this is a year that's important to us here in Minneapolis at the Consulate General because it marks our 50th anniversary in the region, covering the states of Minnesota, Nebraska, Iowa, North Dakota, and South Dakota. For me, it's a real privilege to be Consul General at this time and to be here to see the USMCA come to fruition in a few days. I invite you to reach out to the Consulate General if we can be of any assistance in helping to strengthen the vital and excellent trading relationship that exists between Nebraska and Canada. And thank you all for participating today. The more we work together to address our common challenges, the stronger we as a continent will be and more powerful a trading bloc we will be as we fight for market share around the world. Thank you very much for listening to me and giving me your time. And with that, I will pass on to my Mexican colleague, Deputy Consul Ricardo Sanchez.
Thank you very much to everyone. Good afternoon, Governor Ricketts. You were so kind with your words. I will transmit to my head consul and to my colleague, Consul Doya. Thank you so much. To all our audience, today is a great day because we are here united to talk about Nafta and now USMCA. As you may know, we have become key members after more than 33 years, more or less. Since that time, Mexico has become the main trading partner of the U.S., and we represent more than 15% of the imports and exports that you have with all the world. You may know that also we are your main partner last year, and we represent about 80% of the exports that we allocate to your market. Mexico is Canada's third largest trading partner, and Canada is our fourth largest trading partner. As you may see, this productive integration has been promoted not only by the flow of trade thanks to preferential treatment and the elimination of tariffs, but also due to the growth in foreign direct investment received by Mexico. Mexico foreign trade has become an engine of economic growth. Currently, Mexico has a network of 13 free trade agreements with at least 50 countries worldwide. And that means a clear relationship between dynamic growth and of trade abroad with economic activity. The integration, of course, has allowed Mexico to attract investment and become a center of manufacturing of medium and advanced technology. And we have become an important anglo exporter. This has been reflected in the last 3 years, how we have changed our platform, exported platform, from oil, as you may remember, extractive activities, to now manufacturing, a very competitive manufacturing sector, and as well in the automotive area. Now we are exporting more than 20 kind of cars, different models, different companies to all the world. So we are very happy that Nafta has allowed Mexico to become the second site for attracting direct investment in Latin America, only after Brazil, reaching almost $600 billion from 1999 until March of this year. More than 50% of this foreign investment comes from US and Canada, our major trade partners. We are so thankful with all of you. And we find now in this process of modernization of Nafta to USMC, and Of course, we have to continue working in this competitiveness. We have to work in a lot of situations. Now we are facing international trade tensions. We are facing a pandemic situation. But these things, we have to continue working. We have to move on. And in this matter, I want to tell something very important about the relation between Mexico and Nebraska. Since we established this consulate of Mexico in Omaha in 2001, we have played an important role in developing Mexico-Nebraska relationship. My head consul has been part of that history. We have had an intense participation in forums and conferences for the promotion of our economic and commercial relationship, as well as the promotion of the investments, which is a priority for Mexico. In terms of economic and commercial promotion, I totally agree, Governor Ricketts, with you that your two visits that you headed to Mexico in August 2018 and February 2019, leading important trading missions, were a clear testimony of the value Nebraska has given to our bilateral relation. Hopefully, we can continue working in these missions in the coming future. Also, I want to share with you that according to the Federal Reserve Bank, in 2018, Mexico became the first Nebraska exporting partner with a bilateral trade that reached $1.7 billion. Mexico was the first buyer of corn, grain of soy, and meat products produced and exported by this state. Mexico-Nebraska bilateral trade relationship contributes to the creation of about 34,000 jobs in the state. In this way, Mexican investment in Nebraska, as Governor Ricketts has shared, through the companies of Bimbo, Lala, and Gruma, we reach about $100 million in Nebraska, and contributing to create about 1,200 jobs directly. This is very important, and we have an example very clear with a company named Balmon Industries, located in Valley, Nebraska, which has a very important investment in Monterrey, and they are producing a lot of things. And from Mexico, they are exporting and selling to many countries in all the world. Last October, I remember Secretary of State, Secretary Robert Ebnen, recognized the remarkable contribution of the Mexican citizens who work here in Nebraska. He underscored the importance of the Mexican workforce in Nebraska economy, temporary workers participating in the plantations, in harvesting cycles, and those who permanently work in the construction, in the meat and food process, in gardening, and so on. In this point, I want to just comment our best disposition to continue promoting also our bilateral efforts to approach our countries, such as a teacher exchange program that we have now, and we hope to continue with these big efforts that we are doing after these pandemic times. Talking about the opportunities going forward in several areas, in several aspects in the USMCA that will enter into force on 1st of July, a historical date for all of us, especially for the US, 3 days before your anniversary of your independence, will be a very important instrument that has certainty because contains clear rules and is very predictable, maintaining free trade and preserves American integration in its 34 chapters, which were renegotiated and modernized. I can say that USMCA represents challenges, but also great opportunities, especially in the agricultural sector, which were eliminated tariffs and non-tariff restrictions between our 3 countries. In the other way, we have the manufacturing sector, which includes pharmaceuticals, medical devices, cosmetics, information technology, communications, chemicals, energy efficiency, standards, etc. So this is another chapter, very important, and of course, the automotive industry, which, you know, we have Mexico, we know we have to do a great job to comply with the sector's rule of origin in order to be considered as origin country. This is very important, the rules of origin, because it's a challenge for everybody since it's much more restrictive with a higher level of national and or regional contents. So this will create opportunities for investment in the region and develop providers in Mexico that can help meet these new levels of regional content. So I would like to say that also about the foreign trade has been a great help of the Mexican economy and therefore puts much attention on the restoration of the supply chain that they were affected by the shock of supply and demand. And to be very brief, I would like to refer very fast to the new provisions that Mexico perspective thinks that will benefit the trade relationship between our countries. And there are some of them that already were talked by my colleague from Canada and Governor Ricketts, but I will be very fast. I could say that the information and technology and communication technologies are very important, labor issues, environmental issues, cross-border trading services, small and medium-sized enterprises. There was a need very important to in the global success story and as providers of the value chain to promote cooperation, to create spaces and facilitate the development of these small and medium enterprises. As you may know, in Mexico we have a lot of them, and also very important topic in the new agreement, which already Governor and Consul General, the lawyer, were talking about the digital commerce, in addition to promoting the growth of this trade to protect the rights of consumers, protect data in commercial transactions. We know in these pandemic times that the digital commerce and in the digital economy have been a very effective way to keep the economy running. We have seen significant growth in Mexico, both in internet access and telecommunications, and we are seeking to develop new platforms in Mexico to expand online operations. Last but not least are the anti-corruption efforts that were included in the USMCA. This chapter is the most ambitious in the field, and Mexico was the main promoter of the improvements, where parties should work at government level in order to penalize acts of corruption that affect trade and investment, combat corruption within companies' structures, and strengthen intergovernmental cooperation between authorities, exchanging experiences and best practices. Just to finalize my intervention, I would like to say something that since December 2018, we have a new important international agreement, and well known as the Comprehensive and Progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership, TPP or CPTPP, which entered into force for Mexico, Australia, Canada, Japan, New Zealand, and Singapore. TPP is in line with the diversification, inclusion, and innovation strategy carried out by the government of Mexico. TPP expands the network of agreements to 13 countries and allow us to have preferential access to 49, but will be 2 more in the coming months, 51 in total. And this TPP creates the conditions to increase trade and investment in both ways with new partners in the Asia-Pacific region. This region, as you may know, shows the most dynamic growth rates in the world. For this reason, we believe USMCA, together with TPP, offer great opportunities for our 3 nations. Hence it is, our companies, I may say that we need to work hard to reach necessary competitiveness to be able to enter into international markets. Altogether, we will reach greater productivity that must be achieved with merchandise with higher added value and quality in order to be competitive in other regions. We have to continue working in human capital, technology matters, training, certifications, which explains why the modernization of the productive plant and the strengthening of the industrial development is necessary. We know many opportunities are there, we have in front of us, but challenges still and will continue to arise in the coming months. I wish all the best to Canada, to U.S., and to my Mexico, to my people, to our people, because Nebraska is my people too. All the best, and Governor, we wish you all the best in these coming months and success for all the efforts that your government is doing facing the pandemic. Thank you very much to all of you. I have the pleasure to hand over to my colleague, Kyle Wells, and thank you very much, Kyle.
Thank you, Deputy Consul Sanchez, for those excellent remarks. In a moment, I will share my presentation, slide deck that will be available to everyone after the session. But good afternoon to everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you today to talk about USMCA. I'd like to thank the Omaha Chamber of Commerce for the invitation. It's been a real pleasure working with the team at the Chamber to prepare for this event. I'd also like to thank Governor Ricketts for his remarks and his leadership on trade and investment at USMCA. Also, thanks to Consul General DeLoya and again, Deputy Consul Sanchez for their excellent remarks, presentations. Over the last few months, the office that I work in, the Office of North America at the International Trade Administration, we've conducted numerous presentations with Mexico and Canada's consuls generals to promote the benefits of USMCA, and it's a real honor to continue working together trilaterally as we look forward to next week and the July 1st implementation date. So today I'm going to talk about three aspects of the USMCA, what's important to know on day one of the agreement, some of the major differences between NAFTA and USMCA in key chapters that have been covered, and highlight a few new chapters as well. But before we do that, just to add a bit more context to the previous remarks on why the agreement is so important, especially to the United States and specifically to Nebraska, is that overall the United States, Canada, and Mexico have the greatest trading relationship in the world. The United States conducts more than $1.3 trillion in annual trade with Canada and Mexico. U.S. exports to both markets are estimated to support close to 3 million U.S. jobs. Canada and Mexico are the United States' largest export markets, and we share extensive borders. If we could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So, like I said, this presentation will provide some visual reinforcement on what you need to know to prepare for the USMCA, specifically tariffs. 90% of the questions that we've been receiving relate to the certification of origin, de minimis, and rules of origin. Again, major differences are in these key chapters that you see here, and there are new key chapters that are quite excellent in the USMCA. Next slide, please. This is a snapshot of Nebraska's trade with Canada and Mexico. Not only are Canada and Mexico important to U.S. trade, but they are important to Nebraska trade. In 2019, Nebraska exported $3.3 billion to Canada and Mexico, accounting for 44% of Nebraska's total goods exports to the world. And it's almost an even split, Nebraska exporting $1.6 billion to Canada and $1.7 billion to Mexico. Next slide, please. So preparing for USMCA, as has been mentioned, all products that have zero tariffs or had zero tariffs under NAFTA will remain at zero under USMCA. Canada will provide new and expanded access via tariff rate quotas for U.S. exports of milk, cheese, cream, skim milk powder, condensed milk, yogurt, and several other dairy categories. It will also, Canada will also eliminate their tariffs on whey and margarine. So for additional information, this is one of the tools that we offer at ITA. Within the slide deck itself, there'll be a scroll over, but you can access the FTA tariff tool at ITA's website. Next slide, please. Just a bit of an overview on the certification of origin. USMCA no longer requires the Nafta certification of origin. On July 1st, CBP will no longer accept the Nafta certification of origin form 434, but CBP has provided an optional certificate template on its website that you see here. Next slide, please. Getting into the specifics, USMCA certification requires that a set of 9 data elements be submitted to proof origin. These elements may be provided on an invoice or any other document and can be presented in any format similar to other more modern trade agreements that were implemented subsequent to NAFTA. The USMCA allows producers, exporters, and importers to supply the information needed to certify the product's origin. However, the importer is responsible for exercising reasonable care concerning the accuracy of all documentation submitted to CBP. Under the USMCA, the document that certifies origin may be completed electronically and with an electronic or digital signature. CBP has updated its interim implementing instructions. They did so on June 16th, which the June 3rd uniform regulations, taking those June 3rd uniform regulations into account. The instructions are essentially a guide for chapters 4, 5, 6, and 7 of the agreement and cover issues such as claiming preferential treatment, rules of origin, and record keeping. Next slide, please. So on de minimis, the de minimis threshold sets the value of goods below which no duties or taxes are collected by customs. To help make trade easier, faster, and cheaper, the following de minimis level shipment values will be followed. Shipments up to these de minimis values will generally enter with minimal formal entry procedures. Next slide, please. Concerning rules of origin, the USMCA also includes stronger rules for industrial products that will increase regional content and help preserve North American manufacturing, including new rules for auto and auto parts, chemicals, and steel-intensive products. There were also minor changes to additional products such as glass and fiber optics. These rules will help ensure that only producers who use sufficient amounts of North American parts and materials receive preferential tariff benefits. To ensure that you're familiar with the rule of origin for your product, please visit Chapter 4 of the agreement. For auto rules of origin, it increases regional value content for automobiles from 62.5% to 75%, thus incentivizing more auto production in North America. It includes a first-of-its-kind labor value content rule that requires a certain percentage of each vehicle, 40% for passenger vehicles and 45% for light trucks, to be manufactured in a North American factory in which workers make an average wage of at least $16 an hour. It increases regional value content for core, principal, and complementary auto parts, and requires that core vehicle parts such as engines, transmissions, axles, body panels, suspensions, steering systems, and EV batteries be produced in North America from regionally sourced steel, aluminum, and other key parts and materials. It also requires more auto production in North America to qualify for duty-free treatment by eliminating NAFTA's deemed originating loophole. For chemicals, allowing chemical processes to confer origin is new for the North American region, as these new rules were not in NAFTA. For steel and iron products in HS Chapter 73, USMCA requires that 70% of steel by weight come from North America. Next slide, please. So at a glance, these are the major differences in key chapters, which have been mentioned previously. You'll see IPR, financial services, customs and trade facilitation, textiles and apparel, agriculture, and advanced rulings. Next slide. To go a bit more in depth in the new key chapters, we have good regulatory practices. This is a first of its kind for a U.S. trade agreement. This will help reduce and prevent non-tariff barriers through increased transparency evidence-based decision-making, and whole-of-government internal coordination. Good regulatory practices can support the development of compatible regulatory approaches among the parties and reduce or eliminate unnecessarily burdensome, duplicative, or divergent regulatory requirements. On digital trade, it prohibits the application of of customs duties and other discriminatory measures to digital products distributed electronically, such as videos, music, software, and games. It ensures that data can be transferred across borders. It facilitates digital transactions by permitting the use of electronic authentication and signatures, and it cracks down on data localization measures. As mentioned on small and medium-sized enterprises, this is a first for a US FTA. The USMCA includes a standalone chapter on SMEs. The chapter promotes cooperation between the parties to increase SME trade and investment opportunities and establishes information sharing tools that will help SMEs better understand the benefits of the agreement. It also establishes a committee on SME issues comprising government officials from each country. It launches a new framework for an ongoing SME dialogue with stakeholders to help ensure that SMEs continue to benefit from the agreement. On the environment, it brings the environment obligations into the core of the agreement and makes them fully enforceable. There are obligations to combat trafficking in wildlife, timber, and fish, to strengthen law enforcement networks to stem such trafficking, and to address pressing environmental issues such as air quality and marine litter. In addition, the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative has funding for outreach events for U.S. importers and exporters on the environment chapter's regulations. On labor, again, it brings those obligations into the core of the agreement and makes them fully enforceable. It requires the parties to adopt and maintain in law and practice labor rights as recognized by the International Labor Organization. It obligates parties to address violence against workers for exceeding their labor rights. It prohibits the importation of goods made by forced labor, and it includes an annex on worker representation and collective bargaining in Mexico. The dispute settlement chapter establishes the first of its kind rapid response mechanism that will provide for monitoring and expedited enforcement of labor rights in Mexico at particular facilities while respecting the sovereignty and due process of Mexico. And I should mention that the Department of Labor will publish its interim rules by June 30th. Next slide, please. And as you can see here, we have a host of USMCA resources. I would definitely point you to our trade.gov/USMCA website. It has all of the information presented in the slide deck today and much more. It includes links to Customs and Border Protection, who they have established a USMCA center. You can also send questions to USMCA at cbp.dhs.gov. The International Trade Administration, we have also set up a website too. It's USMCA questions at trade.gov, and you also see links here to USTR's website and USDA's website. And with that, I'll conclude my presentation and turn it back over to the host.
Well, thank you very much to all our speakers. We're now going to take questions from the audience. So if you've not had a chance already, please use the Q&A chat mechanism on your screen to type in a question if you have some for the panelists. And if all the panelists would come back on video, we'll start giving them some questions. So first question I'm gonna send to the governor while we wait for everybody else to come on. And Governor, this is a little bit unrelated to the trade agreement, but not, which is you've led a number of very successful trade missions. And clearly the trade missions to Mexico and Canada have been very successful for businesses in Nebraska. How important from your standpoint do you think it is for our exports to participate in those trade missions, and what are the benefits they get out of that, particularly now with the new trade agreement?
Well, I think that going on trade missions is incredibly important for people who want to do business in those countries. And it's, you know, at the end of the day, it's just like business here. It's about relationships. When you go on a trade mission, you have a chance to develop relationships and make contacts in the country that we go to. Contacts are in government, they're in business. You can get the answers to regulatory questions. I'll give you an example of just how a trade mission can be beneficial. We had a Nebraska company that was seeking to ask some questions with regard to the new administration in Mexico, and we were able to get a meeting with one of the deputies down there, and they were able to ask their questions directly. And again, it just allows us to kind of cut through some of the red tape that have to go through ordinarily and some of the delay to be able to get to the right government officials to ask those questions. So that's just one example of how it benefits. Or, you know, another trade mission, Norm Krug was able to make a connection with one of his partners in China that ended up being a big distributor for him. So, you know, again, it's about just making those contacts, and then, of course, it's still up to you to cultivate the relationship and make sure you follow up on it and, you know, find out how you can make it a mutually beneficial relationship. But, you know, it starts with, again, the fundamental premise that all of these business relationships are about personal relationships, about making that personal contact and really building upon that to be able to grow your business. So I think that's one of the biggest examples of why these trade missions are so important. I think it also, the other thing I would just say is kind of getting back to what Consul General DeLuya said. Look, you want to go to your best customers and say thank you, right? I mean, this is simple. Yeah, this is business 101, right? Go to your best customers. You want to grow your business, start with your best customers and start by saying thank you. And I think that's another great opportunity that all Nebraskans have the opportunity when they go on these trade missions, is just to say thank you to our trade partners who have really helped us grow these relationships.
And I'll let the General Counsel and Deputy Counsel weigh in if they have any views on this as well before we go to the next question. Okay, so let me ask one of the questions that we have from the audience. Question is it true that the de minimis increase to Canadian dollars $40 applies only to carrier shipments, for example, UPS, FedEx, and does not apply to post office shipments?
I don't believe that's the case. The de minimis rules, I think, apply both to in-person crossings, so Canadians returning to Canada after, say, shopping in Minnesota or North Dakota. Those de minimis thresholds have been increased, as have those for goods that have been ordered and mailed, whether it's USPS or UPS or FedEx or DHL. I don't think makes a difference. I'm not entirely certain, so I'll reserve, saying that that's the definitive answer. But that would be easily verifiable on the Canada Border Services Agency's website, both for Canadians traveling and wanting to know what their limits are, and for Americans, shippers or otherwise interested in knowing what those thresholds are under the new rules.
Thank you. So as trade agreements go, and this is a very, very complex agreement, I have been watching the news articles for the last couple of weeks, and while there are some issues starting to percolate, there's, for a trade agreement this size, very few issues percolating. But clearly, I assume that there will be times where there'll be some more work on this agreement that the countries will undertake based on the experiences as this begins to come into effect in July. Is there a process between the countries to continue to work any particular issues or at the current time as it's implemented?
I'll take a stab at that. In part, yes. Obviously, for the last several months, once our Parliament finalized the ratification process, it was the last of the three countries to do so. There was a period of time that was spent in all three countries, but certainly in mine, to ensure that our regulatory regime was amended and aligned to comply with the new requirements set forth with the USMCA. So that process, of course, was vital to enabling the entry into force of the agreement in all three countries next week. I suspect one area where you might see further work as we move forward is regulatory harmonization, to the extent that there is an ability to do that. That's often been pointed to by various people, obviously a lot of our business partners in all three countries, frankly, as one of the unhelpful obstacles that can sometimes stand in the way of even more fluid and smooth trade. There was a process in place under Nafta to move forward on regulatory reforms. I suspect you'll see a little bit more wind in the sails of that effort once we welcome the new USMCA next week.
And if I could build on that, I think USMCA has a number of other provisions too. Many of the chapters have consultative committees. So in a lot of ways, it kind of reinvigorates a lot of the promises that were made under NAFTA. So many of the chapter committees will be getting together immediately within 6 months or within a year to continue the discussions. Regulatory cooperation, of course, is something that's highly important. As the Consul General mentioned, U.S. and Canada, we have an existing Regulatory Cooperation Council. This is outside of USMCA, but it's a dialogue that's been able to kind of set a framework between our regulators to reduce regulations where it makes sense. And there's also a competitiveness chapter within USMCA. And again, that kind of sets a framework for a potential discussion in the future. Of course, everyone is concerned about supply chain security and where that discussion is going. So there is a framework kind of built into the agreement itself to carry on those discussions and to talk about specifics.
So Kyle, let me follow up on that comment regarding supply chains, because we get this question quite a bit, which is there's a general feeling following the pandemic that perhaps we haven't risk costed our global supply chains for things like pandemics, and many of our manufacturers particularly experienced supply chain disruptions. There's a feeling that bringing them back onto the continent provides a risk mitigation related to that. Is it the sense of the three countries that the timing of this is going to be part of an effort indirectly to bring supply chains back to the continent?
Well, I would say, one of the things that we always talk about with our trading partners, Mexico and Canada, is, thinking of ourselves as a North American production platform. So in light of the pandemic, it's drawn a lot of scrutiny to, the security of our supply chains. How do we secure them? How do we reduce risk for companies? And we know that companies are actively, considering whether it's a nearshoring or reshoring, or simply kind of reducing risk to ensure the survival and the competitiveness of their company or for their industry. So just within the context of working with the government of Canada, I can assure you that, there have been active discussions with Canadian officials to ensure that those channels and lines of communication are open. And there's a lot of thinking going on, within the U.S. government of to what products do we look at, what industries do we look at, what key inputs to certain critical industries do we look at. So there's been a lot of work that's been going on, and I think it bodes well that we have USMCA in place and that it will be implemented next week. I think that really just furthers the discussion for all of us.
I'd echo what Kyle said. If anything, the COVID-19 pandemic has illustrated the degree to which we might be at times vulnerable on our external reliance for critical supplies. And it's an obvious area for more attention within the three countries, and that is already there exists a number of integrated supply chains in the health sector, in the life sciences sector. One example among many I could cite is there are components for ventilators that are made in Canada that obviously earlier on in the pandemic were critical as we were all trying to grapple with the fear of having our healthcare systems overwhelmed. It's interesting that when we go through something like that we've experienced over the last few months, there's a normal, perfectly understandable reflex to say, we can't allow ourselves to be caught short-handed like this in the future. And so the route or the solution to that is going it alone. But the reality is that I don't think that we realistically can all go it alone, but we know who our friends are. And as far as Canada is concerned, we have no closer friends when it comes to trade, national security, than the United States and obviously Mexico as well as part of that broader discussion. And it's entirely logical that as we take lessons from the COVID-19 experience, that there will be an appetite for seeing where some of these supply chains, particularly for vital products, need to be either repatriated or strengthened within North America as opposed to relying on external sources.
Yeah, this is Pete Ricketts. I just want to echo what the Consul General said. I think that's exactly right. I think that's just well said there, Consul General, that, it's natural to say, hey, we can't let this happen to us again, but you're right. We know who our friends are. And I think that, if anything, this pandemic emphasizes the importance of this trade relationship between Canada, Mexico, and the United States, and the importance of those supply chains. And again, having that, especially for some of these critical things, I think that it will lead us to be able to reevaluate those. And I know certainly from my perspective and my Department of Economic Development's perspective, we are going to be working on those companies that maybe have some of those supply chains that stretch over to Asia and work on getting them back into North America.
So I have to ask the question, and it's beyond the scope of this agreement, but this agreement, it really, you can see in Nebraska the recovery starting to happen, and people getting back to work, and manufacturers getting very busy again, and transportation companies being very busy. As this trade agreement is implemented, and we've got more goods and people moving cross-border, and pandemic restrictions in each country, is there an effort between the countries to make those border crossings much easier from a pandemic standpoint?
I'll take a stab at that. It's a subject I get questions on virtually every day. It's amazing how it took a pandemic to realize what we take for granted. There are 400,000 border crossings every day just between Canada and the U.S. I wouldn't know what the number is between Mexico and the U.S. Of course, that was pre-COVID. What's striking about when we talk about an integrated relationship between at least Canada and the United States, it's not just in trade. I mean, obviously that's an area where we all see it and live it firsthand, but it's true as well in the national security, continental security sphere. And what was remarkable about the decision made by both the U.S. and Canada, and the U.S. and Mexico for that matter, to limit traffic at the border to anything but essential trade-related, essential worker-related traffic once the pandemic really hit us hard, was that those decisions, at least speaking in a Canada-U.S. context, which I can talk about, were done really very almost seamlessly and effortlessly. Yes, there was consultation for the initial decision to limit crossings of the border between the administration in Washington, the government in Canada, in Ottawa, but then the subsequent decisions to extend that period, it was done originally on March 21st for a month, subsequently extended on April 21st, May 21st, and just a couple of days ago, again for another month until July 21st. Those latter decisions were made by bureaucrats, basically on both sides. They didn't require big announcements by the president or the prime minister or the cabinet in Canada. But like everyone else, I too am eager to see the border restrictions eased. But I can tell you from our discussions with the administration that both in Washington and in Ottawa, the overriding consideration with respect to how we manage the border, at least for the foreseeable future, is the public health imperative. We still have a number of areas in Canada that are hard hit. It's a bit like the United States. It's, Canada's a big country in land size, and it has its diversity in terms of geographic regions, as does the U.S. And so it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. And one thing that I think both governments feel strongly about is once we do ease the restrictions at the border, we don't want to do it sort of piecemeal, have a different regime between North Dakota and Saskatchewan than we would have between Quebec and New York, or British Columbia and Washington State, or other jurisdictions. So it's a work in progress. I think for now at least there's a certain degree of comfort's perhaps the wrong term, but there's a certain degree of shared view between the U.S. and Canada that the current approach is the right one in terms of the public health emergency that we're facing. But obviously, everyone wants to get back to normal. We're under pressure from our citizens to ease the border restrictions. It's summer. A lot of businesses, especially along the border on both sides of the Canada-U.S. border, rely on the summer traffic that's generated by visitors from across the way, and that's being adversely affected, and it's contributing to the economic challenge we all face trying to get ourselves back on our feet and overcoming this awful impact this virus has inflicted on our economies.
Yes, I go to what my colleague, Consul General of Canada, saying about these crossings with Mexico. As you may know, with the pandemic since March until June 22 of this just 2 days ago, the restrictions were along the border with Mexico and the U.S. However, along the border, there are about 330 ports of entries. The restrictions were more in this side, not in Mexico. In Mexico, still you can go enter and crossing. However, I hope that this situation already will be lifted in these days. So we expect that this the entry into force of this USMCA will be under a new circumstances and new time for everyone. So we are looking forward to see that the time is passing by, and the extraordinary moments that we face every one of your countries will start to be better and better, and despite the serious impact that this coronavirus has had in our economies. Thank you.
So we have a question from the audience as well, which is, will the actual harmonization codes remain the same under the new trade agreement?
I'm not sure. I think I'd be safer to say that, at least for speaking for Canada, that I'd want to be able to respond, on an informed basis to the question. I'm happy to have our staff check on that and provide the questioner, whoever he or she is, if they want to get in touch with us, we'd be delighted to try and answer that. Maybe my colleague Kyle Wells has some thoughts on that. My initial instinct would be to say that I assume that whatever regimes exist already, as with much of the agreement, are carried forward into the new USMCA with obviously the add-ons that the new agreement provide. But this is not an area of expertise for me, so I would rather look into it further and give a fully informed response to the question.
So thank you. We will get back on that question, and I will forward that to everyone. I think at this point, what I would like to note is that when I woke up this morning, and I don't know whether this is my 6th or 7th Zoom call of the day, like most people. In my first one, I said, what makes me very happy today is I have something positive to talk about that's not COVID related. And it's been a long time since we've had that. This really is an incredible agreement in terms of all the work that went into it, and for all of you and your governments, and to the governor for all the effort he put into it. This could be a game changer again for North America at exactly the right time. And so we thought it was important. We feel privileged just to be able to host this today. I again want to thank our sponsor, Farmers Mutual. I want to thank Emeritus for their technology experience, and to our other guests. Just so you know, it is my custom that I always give the governor the last word for all the good reasons. And so I'm going to turn to the governor for our last word.
Well, thank you very much, Brian, and thanks for organizing the call. And I want to thank Consul General DeLuya as well as Deputy Consul Sanchez for joining us here today to be able to talk about the USMCA. I am really excited that we got this across the finish line. As I mentioned, and the Consul General said, it took a lot of work in each of our respective countries to get this through the parliaments or the Congress or whatever was required to be able to get this agreement done. And I think it really will help us take this, what has been a tremendously successful trade agreement for over 25 years, to be able to take this to the next level and help the peoples of Mexico, Canada, and the United States all continue to prosper by the trade relationship. So I think a lot of people worked very hard on this. I'm very excited to have this officially kick off July 1st, and I encourage everybody on the call to think about ways that they can expand their business by looking at international trade. It is, 95% of the world's consumers lie outside the borders of the United States. You got to go out there and get them. And this USMCA is a great way to be able to take advantage of that with our two best trading partners in Canada and Mexico. So thanks again, Brian, for hosting this. We appreciate it. And thanks again to the sponsors, Farmers Mutual and Meritas.
And one last question. We've gotten lots of requests, Kyle, for your presentation, so we'll make sure that is posted and available to all the participants today, which has a lot of information and also places you can go for additional information. So thanks to everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you.